Pick a card.
G'day everyone and welcome to the 39th card. My name is Charlie and today we're going to go through a breakdown for every legend with a couple of caveats that placed in the top 10% of any of the tournaments that you see on the side. We're going to go through some cards that are being used a lot and did well, and we're going to go through some cards that maybe aren't being used a lot but also did well to give you an idea on some cards that you might want to include in your deck if you're playing any skirmishes this weekend, or if you go into that big tournament in Dallas next weekend, or if you're just playing locals and are looking for some ideas on how to boost your deck. Just before we go in, I am only going to be going through decks with over about 100 cards and over about a 5% conversion rate. So when we get below there, the data gets a bit messy, and it's usually only maybe one or two players that are converting into the top 10%. My advice, if you are playing one of those decks that maybe isn't considered as good and want some tips, would be to go and see what the players who are performing well on them are doing, as opposed to looking at this video, because large data sets like this aren't really conducive to getting an edge on a deck that doesn't have a massive sample size. I want to give you a quick update on the data. So we decided to remove the regional qualifier Sydney from the dataset. The reason being that we do not have full access to the decks from that regional. They weren't uploaded to UVS or anything, so we've only got a very select sample size. And if you haven't watched my last video, we're using a statistical model to compensate for that lack of data, particularly in the bottom 90% of decks. However, we don't have to deal with that any longer for Utrecht and for Vancouver. So Sydney was really throwing out the conversion numbers. I'll give you an example. Draven was showing I think it was 14 to 16% conversion rate across the board. However, when we included regional qualifier Sydney, it bumped it up to 22% because of the way the decks are weighted. So it just worked out cleaner if we removed Sydney from the data set. However, hopefully if at some point somebody at UVS wants to hit an upload button, we'll be able to get you all the data from Sydney as well. Secondly, we finally have full deck lists for most of the decks at regional qualifiers Vancouver and Utrecht. I want to give a huge shout out to Creighton over at boundrift.com. If you haven't checked out the website, please do so. It's a fantastic companion website for Riftbound. It's got a deck tracker, and it's got all the data that you're going to see today. He's a very smart guy, and he's able to get that data, format it in the way that my data set uses, and send it over. So huge thanks to Creighton and the crew at Boundrift, if there's any more of them. I really appreciate it. Head on over to his website and check it out. The trends are going to be roughly the same, but now that we've got an expanded data set, so we've got around 2,500 extra decks, the numbers are going to look a bit lower. So the massive jump in conversion that we saw, for example, with Vex, with Zhonya's last time, it was about triple. Now, as you'll see, it's about double, which is an accurate reflection. So the statistical model was doing its thing, and it was still showing Zhonya's as an outlier, but it's not going to be showing it as much of an outlier. Battlefields and chosen champions are still not perfect, so for whatever reason UVS cuts out battlefields and the vast majority of chosen champions from their dataset. So for every single legend that we're going to look through, their main chosen champion is going to show as a statistical outlier positively. It's not real. We're not really going to talk about that in today's video because the data does not reflect what's actually happening. Finally, regional qualifier Hartford data is not yet available. Riftx has had some decks published, but as we mentioned before, with the regional qualifier Sydney data, it causes problems to the larger data set, and it prevents us from presenting a proper statistical analysis. So we're going to leave Hartford out for now, but I do have plans to do a video just going through some of the top decks if we don't have all the data available, and having a look at how that matches up. So just a couple of quick notes on data presentation. Had a few comments in the last video talking about how lift and drop were a little bit confusing. So we are still going to be measuring the conversion by the top 10% of the field, but I've decided to remove lift and drop in favor of conversion change. So for ease of presentation, we're just going to have one number, especially because we're going to be going through a bunch of decks today. We're going to have one number that shows how much the conversion increases when including that card as compared to the base conversion rate for that legend. The base conversion numbers are very important when evaluating these percentages, so they're going to be shown on screen at all times. Bear in mind, so for an example, a 5% conversion increase on a deck that has a 5% base conversion is much more significant than a 5% increase on a deck that has a 20% base conversion, although both are pretty good. So keep that in mind when we're going through these numbers. Finally, I've got 3 categories of cards. These were arbitrarily decided by me just for ease of presentation. We've got core, which is an 70% or above representation rate for that legend. Then we have staple, which is 69, nice percent down to 30% inclusion. And then we have tech cards, which are 29% all the way down to 0%. I hope this makes sense. I'm going to be doing this unscripted and just talking you through what I'm seeing on the screen. A bit different from last video. If you like it, please let me know. If you prefer the more structured style with this kind of visuals, again, do let me know. Thank you. So for those of you who don't work in data analysis or don't work in corporate jobs, this is Power BI. It's a data visualization tool. So what you'll see on the left-hand side here is the core cards, the staple cards, and the tech cards. And they're all sorted by, the core cards are sorted by conversion change, same as the staple cards. And then the tech cards are sorted by prevalence. So we can see, you know, we want to look at a card with, say, 25% prevalence more than we want to look at a card with about 5% prevalence. As you can see, the total amount of decks, once we run it through the statistical model, is just over 6,500, and the conversion rate 9.9, which makes sense because we're looking at the top 10%. First up, we're going to take a look at Annie. So we have 153 decks in our sample size with a conversion at base of 14.1%. If we take a look at core cards against the odds and cleave, couple of powerful combat tricks, both sitting at about 66% inclusion, and they're both increasing conversion rate by about 1.5%. Moving down into staple cards, we do see Annie stubborn, but as I mentioned before, chosen champion data is not perfect, so we'll skip over that one. We'll look at the next 2 cards, Rebuke at 32% with an increase of 3.35, and Kha'zix Mutating Horror sitting at 68% inclusion with an increase of 1.49. Now, if we move over to core cards, we'll have a look at invert timelines first. It's being included in 16.6% of Annie decks and increasing the conversion by 6.3%. Next, we'll go to Mind Splitter, 11.5% inclusion with a 3.8% increase in conversion rate. And I do want to also point out Pyke Returned at 8.8% inclusion and a conversion increase of 9.3%. And Fresh Beans, which is being included in 8% of Annie decks and increasing conversion by 11.1%. So the next deck we're going to look at is Azir. So our sample size is 223 and our base conversion is 11.7%. Now Azir does seem to be one of the more homogenized legends in the game. As you can see over here in our core section, we have 11 cards that are all sitting above 70%, and the only one with a real noteworthy conversion change is Ash, which is being included in 73% of decks, and it's increasing the conversion by 3%. Again, if we go over to the tech cards, because there's nothing in staple except for the chosen champion, Disarming Rake is being included in just over a quarter of Azir, and it's improving the conversion by 3%. We've also got Sacred Shears, which has been running about 5% of decks, upping the conversion by 10%, and Imperial Decree, 3% of decks, increasing conversion by 20%. But with such a small sample size, it's hard to tell if the cards are actually making a difference in performance, or if a couple of players had included them in their deck and had a lucky run. Let's move on now to Diana. Our sample size is 498 decks, and our base conversion is 17.2. Taking a look at the core cards, there's nothing above 1%, so it seems like the cards that you see out there, those 8 cards, are pretty staple to Diana. They're getting included in almost every deck, and they're not really moving the needle too much. Where we do start to see the needle move is down in the staple section with Kha'zix Mutating Horror. It's being run in 35% of decks and improving the conversion by 3%. We also have Acceptable Losses and Traveling Merchant being run in 64 and 59% of decks respectively, increasing the conversion by 1.8% for both of them. Moving over to the tech cards, we see Sprite Fountain being run in just over a fifth of decks, It's increasing the conversion by 2.45%. We also see Plundering Poro at a 22% inclusion, improving conversion by 2%. Wages of Pain is being run in 15% of Diana decks, and it's increasing the conversion by 6.43. And then we have Mind Splitter and Retreat, both at about 10% inclusion, improving conversion by 3% and by 10% respectively. Dr. Mundo also seems to have a niche use case, sitting at 10% inclusion and increasing the conversion by 6.1%. Let's go now to Draven. We have 104 decks in our sample with a 12.2% conversion. Over in core, we have Cleave, Overzealous Fan, Brynhir, and Darius Trifarian, all sitting above 70%, and Cleave only just sitting below 80%. Everything else is above 80%. They all have an increasing conversion of 1% or greater, with Cleave being the highest at 1.96%. Down in the staple cards, we see Flash and Jin Murderous Artist, both at over a 1% increase in conversion, 1.5 and 1.42 respectively, both being included in about 52% of decks. Going now to tech cards, we see Baron Nashor being included in a quarter of Darius decks, and up in conversion by 4%, and Factory Recall, 21.5% inclusion rate, with a conversion increase of 6%. One that I do want to point out before we move on though is Blighted Battle Axe. It's being included in 10% of Darius decks, and they converted at an over 30% rate into the top 10% of their tournaments. So could be a list out there running Battle Axe that's performing way better than other Draven lists even, that might be worth checking out. We'll go now to Ezreal, who we saw in the top 4 at Utrecht, put on a show with a hard control list, and the numbers do seem to back that up as being the strongest Ezreal list out there. So 139 decks in our sample, 15.45% conversion rates. Bewitching Spirit in the core cards has been run in 87% of decks with a 2.29% increase in conversion. And then if we go down to staple, we will see at the top there Pack of Wonders and Treasure Trove, which seem to be running an engine alongside Bewitching Spirits. They're both being included at a 60 and 50% rate respectively, and they're both increasing conversion by 6%. We also have Sneaky Deckhand and Acceptable Losses, 30% and 35% inclusion respectively, and 4.52 and 3.6% increase in conversion. Going down to tech cards, Kha'Zix is there, but it's only a 0.5% increase, but we see Whirlwind there being included in 1/10 of Ezreal decks, and increasing conversion by 25%. So again, some lists out there including it as more than likely a sideboard card, I would assume, seeing a lot of success with Whirlwind. Now we go to Fiora, and we finally have some good Fiora data. So we've got 163 decks in our sample size with a 12.3% conversion. Over in the core section, we see Fiora victorious right up the top, but as she's running Chosen Champion in the majority of Fiora decks, we're going to leave that one alone because the data's probably wrong. Akshan Mischievous is the only card in the core section with above a 1% lift in conversion. It's being run in 86% of decks with a 1.14 increase. Going down now to staple cards, we see a lot of staple cards sitting within this range, giving a decent increase in performance. Shepherd's Heirloom is the big one. Half of decks are running it with a 4.75% increase in performance. Rengar Trophy Hunter, about a third of decks with a 3.57% lift. Harness Dragon, 66% with a 3.54% lift in conversion as well. We also see Repulse and Call to Glory, both sitting at between 2.5 and 3%, being run at 55% and 38%. If we want to see where Baited Hook sits, Baited Hook sits here in the text section. 21% of decks running Baited Hook with a 6% increase in performance. Dazzling Aurora in 21% of decks with a 0.7% increase in performance. Now, Fiora is run a lot more often in China. It's more often run as that Baited Hook version or as a straight mid-range version, and it does tend to see a lot more success over in China as well. Kinku Monk is worth pointing out too. That's at a 22% inclusion rate with a bump of 11%. I'm playing Fiora at the moment, and I'm definitely going to be trying to fit in Kinku Monk somewhere in the deck. We're going to go now to Irelia, where we see 600 decks as our sample size with a base conversion of 14.74. Similar to Azir, in the core section, we've got a large chunk of cards telling me that the main engine of Irelia is pretty figured out. Down in the staple cards, however, we've got Fizz Trickster sitting just under 42% inclusion with an increase of 1.5%. And then we've got Disarming Rake, Vex Chillus, and Stacked Deck. So they're all sitting between 53 and 68% inclusion, all giving about a 1% increase in conversion rates. Over to the tech cards now, we can see that Rebuke, Edge of Night, and Lonely Poro are all sitting above 20% and all giving above a 2% increase in conversion. However, the big jumps are going to be seen when we look at Switcheroo, which is being included in just under 20% of Irelia decks and increasing the conversion percentage by 10%. And then at a much lower sample size, we have Pyke Returned. 4.35% of Irelia decks are running Pyke Returned, but they're converting at 18.21% higher. Again, there's probably a list going around where a lot of players are using something that maybe a lot of people don't expect to see in Irelia, and that's converting to wins. Let's check out Kai'Sa now. So Kai'Sa, we have 150 decks in our sample size, and it's converting at a 6.29% conversion. So the Boogie Woman of set 1 has definitely fallen from grace a little bit. If we take a look at core cards, we've only got Smite and Progress Day sitting above a 1% increase, being included in at a 79% and 84% rate respectively. Moving down to staple cards, Kai'Sa we can ignore, but we can take a look at Eclipse and Longsword. So both being included in about 33% of Kai'Sa decks and improving conversion by 2.2 and 1.5%, which tells me that there's an angle for manipulating might during combat that Kai'Sa can play around. Going to tech cards now, we see Get Excited, Rengar Pouncing, and Icathian Rain, all getting used in over 10% of Kai'Sa decks and increasing conversion by 2.5%, 2.3%, and 4.5% respectively. Also worth noting that 6.5% of Kai'Sa decks are running Gem Jammer, and that's seeing an improved conversion of 15%, so maybe a tech card to have a gander at some point. Let's take a look at Kha'Zix now. So we have a deck sample size of 170 and a base conversion of just over 10%. Up in the core cards, the only thing that jumps out is Fizz Trickster. It's being run in 89% of decks and it's increasing the conversion by 1.16%. However, if we move down to the staples section, we will see that Lucian Merciless and Mr. Root are both being run in about 40% of Kha'Zix decks, and they're both increasing the conversion by about 4%. So something that I will be looking into and probably posting a short about is, are these cards run together and are they a part of a successful engine that's driving more success in Kha'Zix? We'll take a quick look at Rebuke. So Rebuke is being run in 40% of decks and increasing conversion by just under 3%. Over in the tech section, there's Switcheroo and Evelyn Entrancing, which are being run in 19 and 14% of decks respectively, and seeing increases in conversion of 5.7 and 7.1%. Finally, Acceptable Losses is being run in 13.5% of Kha'Zix decks, and it's seeing an increase in conversion of 12.8%. So probably something that a couple of players have teched in and seen success with on the big stage. Now let's take a look at LeBlanc. So our sample size is 378 decks and our base conversion is just under 12%. If we look at core cards, nothing is giving a boost of any more than a percent. So it looks like that kind of base engine that LeBlanc runs off is pretty much figured out. If we go down to staple cards, however, we will see Baited Hook. So Baited Hook being run in just over 2/3 of LeBlanc decks, and it's seeing an increase in conversion of 1.3%. So again, Baited Hook is getting backed up now that we've got an expanded data set by the numbers that we presented last week in our video. If we take a look at some tech cards, we can see that Singularity is being run in 9.5% of decks and increasing conversion by near 3%, and Stupefy, Smokescreen both being run in 5% of decks and increasing conversion by 3% roughly. We get down to Echo Recurrent, which, while it has a very small sample size, I thought it would be worth mentioning because it's in the zeitgeist at the moment with Lux doing her thing. It's being run in 5% of LeBlanc decks, and the increase in conversion is 12.5%. So similar with Kha'Zix, as we just mentioned, this is probably a card that a couple of players have decided to tech into their deck and seen a lot of success with at large scale tournaments, so it might be worth testing in your locals or online. Now let's have a look at Lillia. So we've got 183 decks total with a base conversion of 6.28%. Up the top in the core cards, you'll see Disarming Rake being used in 75% of Lillia decks and increasing conversion by 2.06%. So it looks like Lillia really values that gear hate that can put a body on the board. Moving down to staple cards, we can see On Guard there being run in 63% of Lillia decks and increasing conversion by just under 2%. Now, if we go over to the tech cards, we can see a couple of highlights. Smokescreen, 20% of decks and increasing conversion by 3%. And Hui Brooding Painter being run in 16% of decks and increasing conversion by 4.33%. The other card that I want to mention is Retreat. It's being run in just over 10% of Lillia decks and it's increasing Lillia's conversion by 8.5%. We'll also mention Lonely Poro there, 8.19% inclusion rate and a 15% increase in conversion. All right, let's look at Lux. So Lux's core cards, the only ones that have a positive impact on win rate in the core section are Progress Day and Ash Focused. But if we go down to the staple section here, we will see Forge of the Future increasing conversion by 8.21%, Soaring Scout 7.5%, Stupefier 6.14%, and then over here in the tech cards, we're going to see Echo Recurrent being run in 25% of Lux decks and increasing the conversion by 9.46. Sacrifice just below, almost 20% inclusion and an increase in conversion of 17.36%. Moving down, we can see other cards that are being run in this Infinite Lux deck, like Retreat being run in 15% of decks and increasing conversion by 24.5%. So if you're planning on playing Lux, it does look like Infinite is the way to go. I'll be surprised if it doesn't see a ban, probably to Forge of the Future, just because of its very uninteractive style of play, which Jack would know from Nexus Night a few weeks ago. Hi, Jack. Let's move on to the Man of the Hour, Master Yi Wuju Bladesman, winner of Regional Qualifier Utrecht. We have a sample size of 559 with a base conversion of 18.76, which is the highest that you're going to see today. Looking at the core section, Ruin Runner and Challenge are both being run at about 75% of Master Yi decks, and they're both increasing its already massive conversion rate by 2% or more. So very, very powerful cards, as we saw with the Camel in the Final Four. Moving down to the staple cards, with a 30% inclusion and a whopping 10% increase in conversion, we have Primal Strength, which, looking at the card set as a whole, has a very strong case for being the most impactful card in the game. Pit Rookie is another one as well, so 37% of Master Yi decks are running Pit Rookie, and it's increasing the conversion by nearly 7%. Disarming Rake being run in just over half of Master Yi decks, increasing conversion by 4%. Looking over at tech cards, we don't see anything with a prevalence of over 16%, but what we do see is Grim Resolve being run in 15.5% of Master Yi decks and increasing conversion by 9.3%. So those Combat Tricks, Grim Resolve and Primal Strength seem to be really putting in work with Master Yi. Now, just as we did last video, we're going to be combining Misfortune and Sivir together because they're essentially the same deck. We have a sample size of 430 with a base conversion of just under 12%. If we look at the core cards over here, we can see that Dazzling Aurora was run in 99% of these decks. We're not really going to look at the core cards because they're all the same, but if we go down to staple, Akshan Mischievous being run in 60% of decks and increasing conversion by 2.3%. Fading Memories is 61% of decks, increasing conversion by 2.2%, and then the Harrowing being run in 40% of decks and increasing conversion by 1.38. If we want to see some other small gains, if we look over here at the tech cards, we've got Annie Stubborn being run in 18% of decks and improving conversion by 3.3%. Punch First as well, 15.7% of decks and increasing conversion by 2%. Now we'll take a look at Pyke. So even though Pyke sits below that 5% threshold that I mentioned earlier, it's been having some good runs into top 8s, and a few people have been asking about what looks good on Pyke in the comments of the last video, so we'll go through Pyke quickly. We have a sample size of 181 with a base conversion of 4.8%. In core cards, we see kind of staple stuff. Noxus Hopeful, Death from Below actually improving the conversion, being run in 73% of decks, improving it by about 1%. And yeah, Hopeful. If we go down to staple cards, ignoring Pyke, Dockside, Butcher, we can see Sharkling and Beast Below, both sitting at about 33% and improving conversion by 1.5 to 1.75%. Just below that, Thermo Beam, tech for all the gear heavy decks out there, it's been running 40% and it's seeing an increase in conversion of 1.2%. If we go over to tech cards, nothing really jumps out too much. Piercing Light, sitting at 22% inclusion and increasing about 3% is noteworthy. And Blighted Battle Axe, which we did see in that top 8 Pyke deck from Utrecht, being included in 16.6% of decks and improving conversion by 2.11%. Now let's check out Rek'sai, which actually has the 4th highest conversion rate out of any of the decks in our set, sitting at 15% with a total sample size of 92. Whether it's because the deck is good, or whether it's because of, if you ever played League of Legends, you know how low play rate champions have pretty high win rates because the people that play them play the heck out of them. Whether it's a case of that, I'm not quite sure, but the numbers do look good on Rek'sai. If we have a look here over at the core cards, Falling Star and Inferna both sit above 1% conversion rate increase at 77% and 71% inclusion respectively. Under Titan sits just below that 1% at 0.97, being included in 73% of decks. If we go down here to the staple cards, Cleave is being included in 40% of decks and it's increasing the conversion by over 10%. So similar sort of numbers to what we saw with Primal Strength in Master Yi just before. Blood Rush as well, increasing conversion by 7%, and Faithful Manufacturer, same numbers, both sitting at around 31% inclusion. Carrion Dredger is also seeing a lot of success, being run in 60% of decks and improving the conversion by 6.18%. Over here in the tech cards, we can see that Kaiser Survivor is being included in 10% of decks and increasing the conversion by 20%. And Legion Rearguard is worth mentioning despite only being included in 7% of decks because it's improving conversion by 21%. Let's go to Teemo Swift Scout, so a sample size 114 and the base conversion 6.7%. Over in the core cards, Vex Apathetic is being run at a 72% rate and increasing conversion by 2.5%. So again, with a lot of these cards that sit about that 70% rate with a high increase in conversion, they should probably be included a little bit more. Staple cards, we've got Stack Deck being run in 2/3 of decks and increasing conversion by 2.15%, and increasing by the same amount in conversion being run in 53% of decks is Edge of Night. Bone Skewer and Gust also notable, Bone Skewer being run in 1/3 of decks and Gust being run in just over half, both increasing conversion by about 1.7%. Over in the tech cards, Stupefy is being run in 1/3 of decks and improving conversion by 6%. And then we can take a look at Ravenbloom Students. It's being run in just over 15% of decks and increasing conversion by just under 16%. So Ravenbloom looking pretty good by the numbers. Our next legend is going to be Vex Gloomist. Our sample size is 210 and the base conversion is 8.65%. Looking at the core cards, we can see Switcheroo, Boots of Swiftness, and Charm all sitting at above 1% increase in conversion, all sitting between 70 and 80% inclusion rates. Going down to the staples, we can see Zhonya's Hourglass, which was mentioned in last week's video. We have a prevalence of 35% and an increase in conversion of 7.08%, so almost doubling the conversion. We can also see Tide Turner at a pretty similar increase in conversion with 6.5% and an inclusion rate of 50%. Now, where we see something interesting with Vex is if we go over to this tech cards section, there's a lot of cards sitting between 15 and 30% inclusion rate that seem to have a massive impact on Vex's conversion. So the first one we see is Last Rites. That's increasing conversion by 11.5% at a 27% inclusion rate. And we then see Sneaky Deckhand and Scuttle Crab, both at about 25% inclusion, and increasing conversion by 6% and 3% respectively. Now we see a couple of cards here that are used quite a lot in common, I would imagine. being Irelia Fervent and On Guard, so both being used at about a 19% rate, and both increasing conversion percent by over 10%. A couple of other cards we'll look at is Mind Splitter, 16% inclusion, and a 10% increase in conversion. And then I did find Flash and Bewitching Spirit interesting. So Flash and Bewitching both at a 7 to 8% inclusion, and both increase. Flash is increasing conversion by 10%, and Bewitching Spirit increasing it by 20%. And the last legend we're going to look at for this video is Viktor. Our sample size is 181, and the base conversion is 12.5%. Looking at the core cards, Sprite Fountain and Stupefy are both being run at near 80% rates and increasing conversion by 3.6 and 2.4% respectively. When we go down to staple cards, we can see Honest Broker, Eclipse, both being run at between 30 and 40%, and they're both increasing conversion by near 10%. So a lot of players run, well, not a lot of players, but a good chunk of players are running those cards in Viktor and seeing a lot of success. Moving down, we can see via Peacekeeper, 52% inclusion with a 4.7% increase in conversion. Carrion Dredger, 40% with a 4.6% inclusion. Xinjiao is at 50% with 3% increase. Sprite Burst, 50% and 3% increase as well. And Ash Focused, 50% and 2% increase. So it seems like there's a lot of cards that the Viktor players are still playing around with, still trying to find a real core of the deck, which we can see as well in the 70% and above, at least in terms of positive win rate. We've only got 6 cards. So going down to tech cards, Chakram Dancer is the big hit there, so 17% inclusion with an 11.7% increase in conversion, and Pickpocket as well, being run in 14% of decks and upping conversion by 8.6%. And that's the end of the video. As I said before, something a little bit different. Please let me know if you like it, if there's something that you'd like me to do differently. Just a couple of things before we go. First off, thank you so much for watching. The support has been incredible. I didn't really think that this would go anywhere, but yeah, it's almost up to 4,000 views now, which is really, really cool to see. So thank you very, very much. All of the people that commented on the first video, you're helping make this channel better. You're helping make me a better producer of videos and a better communicator about the data, and you're giving me great ideas on what to put together in the future. So please, if there's anything that you want, any feedback that you do have, pop it in the comments. I do read every single one of them. And finally, what's coming up next? So I've got a few ideas for videos. I do want to do a video on the difference in meta between the East and the West, and maybe go over some cards that are performing very well in the East that haven't been picked up over here in Australia, America, Europe, etc. I also want to look at how the meta's evolved throughout Unleashed, cards that we've seen crop up after a good performance in a certain tournament, and cards that we've seen die off, and maybe look at some of the reasons why. And then finally, there is the kind of mid-level tournament coming up in Dallas next weekend, which I'm assuming a lot of high-tier American players and maybe some Europeans will be showing up to. So hopefully by that point we also have Hartford data, so I'll be able to put out a video going through both of them at the same time. Just a final note, please don't forget, check out boundrift.com. Creighton's done an amazing job with the website, and this data wouldn't be as robust as it now is without his help. So again, thank you very much. Cheers for watching. 39th card out.